get some stats up here. Hey.
Hey, here we go.
Right.
We are live, apparently, according to the interwebs. It's been a long time since we've been kind of back in the room together. I got a little sick about 5 weeks ago, and been kind of popping up here and there doing some shows. But I've got Earth's Mightiest Critics back together again for the second installment of a series that I love called If You Like, You'll Love. And tonight we are talking about, and this is going to be interesting because I never know what direction these things are going to go. So I could say, if you like the creator, you'll love Ex Machina. Or I could say,
True.
if you like Ex Machina, you'll love the creator. I don't know.
Do we have to
Um,
choose as we go around?
Not
Like which
necessarily.
direction?
It's just
Okay.
it's something, Jeff and I, we came up with this. Actually, I think Jeff, you had kind of pitched this to me. I was like, that's a really cool idea,
Mhm.
but now I'm in this conundrum. I'm like, well, which goes first? But
That's
it's
part.
not
That's
it's
part of
not
the
a
game.
yeah, it's not official. It's not a
Yeah.
competition. It's just, hanging out, having fun, talking movies, as always.
Mhm.
So I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Jeff York of The Establishing Shot and Don Shanahan of Film Obsessive and a billion other websites. And now you're officially an
Oh my
international
gosh.
film critic.
Yeah.
He's
Something like
Austin
that.
Powers, baby.
The most
Yeah,
powers,
baby.
baby. Yeah.
Even though he looks more like Dr. Evil.
Totally. Yeah. The
Whoa.
finger. There it is.
Hey, no more fingering.
Oh,
Wait,
totally.
that was Alien Prometheus, right? Or one of those something involving AI run amok,
That's
which
right.
is
In one of these movies, some fingering could happen there. Yeah.
which is thematically
I won't
appropriate.
say which one, but yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't point towards the kid. Um,
Let's not do that.
well, they're robots, so I don't think that really matters. And that's one of the interesting
Yeah.
kind of points about the creator is this idea of trying to save this robot who could be the potential destruction of mankind, but it's a cute little kid. So what are you going to do? Um, I think that would have been more of an interesting avenue to explore than some of the places they go within the creator. Don, I know,
Mhm.
just real quick, high level, you liked the creator. You were a
Loved it.
fan, right?
Huge
Okay.
fan. Loved it. I know the knock that goes around is the whole oh, it borrows a little bit of this, borrows a little bit of that, and stuff like
A
that.
lot.
And it does. But I'm one of those folks where what doesn't? If you can borrow what you borrow, bend what you bend, flourish what you flourish, and you do it in the guise of still original science fiction and economical science fiction at that, like $80 million is a bargain, and you're doing your best work. You want to put story and location first instead of pure effects. When you do that in a compelling enough story that you got some feels to go in there, you got the human part, the humane and human part of science fiction mixed in with the spectacle that you want to tell, or the big grand ideas you want to tell. I will put those movies above your big splashy things every chance you give me. So yeah, I adored this movie. I didn't mind one bit that it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. The riff I thought it was kind of doing was like the same way if you want to, you can kind of knock Damien Chazelle, for example, where Chazelle is that guy who clearly he loves the musicals and borrows those little nuggets heavily, but still at the end, because of his own chops and because of his own artistic filmmaking, can make his own thing. La La Land is his own thing. Babylon is his own thing, but he's borrowing. You can pick it right out. And yeah, maybe you can look at the creator with Gareth Edwards and pick a few things out. But to tell it in a compelling way, in a non-IP, non-sequel driven, non-TV miniseries entry of legit original science fiction, I'll take that every time. So yeah, I loved it.
Okay. That's one end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Jeff, where do you fall on now? If we disagree here, that's totally fine. We're going to get a wide range of opinions. It's going to make the conversation richer. But Jeff, are you sort of towards the other side of that spectrum?
I was suggesting that we maybe need to entitle this episode, "If You Love Ex Machina, You Ain't Gonna Like the Creator."
Oh, okay.
Here we go.
Yep.
I admire what Don said, and I think those are all attributes of this movie. I do think it's for me, and this is one of those things where it started to rub me wrong fairly quickly. I'm with you, Don. I can take things that are derivative and even carbon copies if they're done well, and I think this one was very well produced. I didn't think it had particularly interesting characters, and I must say, and this just kind of starting to get to me a little bit, and I don't know why. I think it's just You know, there's a lot of awfulness in the world around us, including just what's happened last weeks. But there was so much damage and destruction in this film. I think it took away a lot from those better parts where there was an interesting character study going on. And to me, after a while, it almost became, dare I say, overkill, both literally and figuratively. So much explosion, and it seemed to be like they were outtakes of Michael Bay or Apocalypse Now or something, in a way that I know that there's a, you know, certainly with the Pacific Rim, there's a Vietnam allegory here and intervention and things like that. But I thought they got off a little bit of the really cool stuff in favor of the set pieces and, okay, we're going to now destroy this machine and this whole land. And then, you know, by the end, they're all celebrating. And meanwhile, you know, all these things are falling from the sky and destroying the rice pads and everything. It got, I think, a little bit out of focus in what it wanted to be, where, you know, in comparison, as we'll get to, Ex Machina, so laser tight and focused on this very small, tiny setting and these really three people. But I admire a lot of this, and I admire that it was economical. I think it was interesting that, you know, the sort of idea of how we gussy up war and gussy up weapons, and it's a child, and whether that's a child or a charismatic, you know, celebrity or politician or, you know, people that we like because they look like us, et cetera, all those kind of things are sort of used as weapons of war, you know, and stuff that makes us feel better about ourselves, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those points were here, but, you know, then I thought it got a little bit, you know, it reminded me a little bit too much of stuff that, like, you know, that Cameron does and Michael Bay does, and those things just started to sour me a little bit. I can sit here and almost talk word for word for you about all the things you like and say, yes, I agree. Mm-hmm. However, that was a little less than half for me and more 65% the other way.
Yeah, I got you. Ian, you got to split the triad here.
Y'all are going to be disappointed because I am squarely in the middle.
Okay.
You know, I had heard a lot of the criticisms. I was not impressed by the trailer. I think I was going in expecting to just like pick out, oh, this is from Aliens, this is from Avatar, this is all of this is from Rogue One, because Gareth Edwards was famously, you know, on that movie and was very much involved until he was he replaced, I think, is one word, but, you know, he didn't finish that movie.
Right.
I think it was Tony Gilroy who did it. But especially if you watch The Creator, it's almost, you know, they say it's a non-IP kind of movie, but I mean, this is, especially in the last act, this is Rogue One. I mean, complete with the two heroes embracing as the, you know, giant death machine blows up all around them and wipes them out.
Right.
You know, but being left with a new hope at the end. But the thing is, like, even though I could pick up those, you know, I breezed right past those mile markers.
Yeah.
I thought the journey, aside from the main, like, okay, I love Denzel Washington. I do not love his son. I have yet to be truly impressed with anything I've seen John David Washington do. And it's one of those things where I'm like, he looks the part.
Yep.
He takes great roles. He's got the family pedigree. But when he opens up his mouth, or even when sometimes he's just like looking at another actor, I'm like, have you
missed something? Something's missing, or it's not all clicking.
He doesn't put a lot of stuff in between the lines, which I think,
that's
if you like, think about like what Denzel Washington does with The Equalizer. I mean, it's such a, you know, it's such a Taken sort of ripoff in its way, and it just feels like 1,000 other movies we've seen. And yet, I don't know if he sat there and worked it out with Antoine Fuqua, but you know, he's like, okay, you're going to be sitting there and the camera's going to looking at me for like 10 seconds while I'm thinking, and I'm going to do that a lot. And he does that a lot. But you see this man who's like too old to really be doing this, and yet he's kind of shocked by how stupid these people are around him, just for their lack of moral clarity and their stupidity and everything. You know, he's sizing up, how can I use this weapon and how long is this going to take? Like when he goes in and, you know, cuts those guys ribbons with the credit card and, you know, breaks the guy's fingers because he doesn't know the name. I don't know. I just find him, you know, could teach his kid a few lessons, because I like you said, he looks the part, he moves around well. I mean, he gives it all. He's huffing and puffing all up and down here. But in those moments when you want him to sit there and look at the kid and think something, it's not there. And it's not really written there either. It's not as good as Last of Us, which, despite the fact that it's a, you know, apocalypse war, you know, end of the world kind of zombie sort of story, that show is known and I think revered because of all the stuff that doesn't happen when they're fighting the Zombies.
Exactly.
It's the relationship between the two main characters here. There is an opportunity for that here. There's some of it. I just wish there was more of it.
I hear you. Where I was taken in, the journey had me. I thought there was enough non-battle moments that still resonated, had something going. I know John David Washington is not his father, and is missing something. I think, Jeff, you touched it perfectly, where Denzel has so many other things going on, from a body language and a twinkle behind the eyes thing that his son just doesn't have yet. Presence can work a little bit, where he's still a, not a square-jawed guy, but you're right, the exertion is there. Not unlike, and now I'm going to catch me doing the comparison thing from sci-fi movies, but not unlike Sam Worthington. I think John David Washington is not as wooden as Sam, but not too far away in terms of squishiness of pulp. But yeah, it's I think I'm okay with John David Washington in this role, because if you put a really, really, really big star in there, that's the character, that's the overpowering piece. Where I'm not saying John David Washington is chameleon of chameleons, but he can hide there a little more, because has been as overexposed, and as Jeff said, has been picking very shrewd choices, where he hasn't dove into a Marvel movie yet. He hasn't jumped into an IP. He's working with Nolan. He's learning as he goes. And I'll take that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting a big name movie star in the part.
Yeah.
I'm just expecting someone who can act. I mean, and that's cruel, right? But I was
go for what you want. Act for this. That's what you can say.
Right, sure. But I mean, just in general, because as I said, I've seen him in things, and he's always okay. But I'm always like, okay, who would I rather see in this part? That's what I'm thinking every time I watch a John David Washington performance. But what I was most taken by was Allison Janney's character. I kept rewriting this in my head as it was going along. With what if the movie was following her and her journey, especially because she plays, she's she's part of the military. She's been sent with this group of, not quite space Marines, but to go and track down this nest of AI. Because I guess we should reset the story, and also just to clarify what we're talking about. Justin Finley, we are talking.
Is that where he freezes? But yeah, Justin, if you can't catch Ian, it's we're doing a double. We're doing the Creator and Ex Machina. Just picking the volleyball up for you there, Ian.
Yes, I don't know if I'm back yet. I froze out for a second.
You are.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. Internet troubles abound. But anyway, so yeah, about 15, 20 years ago in this 2070, 2065 future, the story goes, artificial intelligence blew up a nuke in the middle of Los Angeles, killing untold numbers of people. The United States outlaws AI, but other countries around the world, particularly Asian countries, adopt it, go with it, almost come to worship AI.
Right.
The Americans get wind that they're developing some kind of a super weapon, so they develop their own kind of super weapon. There's this giant spaceship thing that orbits Earth and goes around targeting AI nests. There is it Nirmata? Is that the name of the mother AI or the father of AI? There's rumors that Nirmata is building this weapon as someone that can be tracked down and killed. John David Washington's character is embedded undercover, trying to help suss this out so they can be targeted. Anyway, Allison Janney is the commander who sends in this group to go take out this AI weapon. She's got a history of, she had two sons who died in the AI wars, as they called it, one of whom was the kind of taken in by a simulant, which is a robot, an artificially intelligent driven robot who wears sort of a human skin. And this guy fell in love with this robot and was kind of swindled and killed, for the cause. And so she's got this great backstory. She's got these great battle scars all over her face. She's kind of hardened, but you can still tell she's a human being. And the whole time watching this movie, I want to see her discover this AI child and develop a bond with it and learn to overcome her prejudices and past pain and all of that stuff. I'm sorry, but just a regular soldier guy who was undercover, spending the entire movie trying to find his wife, who, they had a
who might
child.
Or may not be Nirmata,
Right.
You know what? You know what's funny, Ian, as you were talking, I was
Interminably, I might add. Yes, I
no,
understand.
not at all. You actually refreshed my memory of a movie as I was watching it that I had a little bit of a similar thought to that, and a movie that I wish they had borrowed a page or two from, rather than some of the more obvious ones they did, was The Fugitive. Because to your point, Allison Janney could have been the Tommy Lee Jones character.
Yep.
Like somebody who
definitely.
you thought, okay, I know where she's coming from. She's not a bad person. She has a lot on her side that is right, and there's a lot of reason for her to be that way. But as soon as they introduce her crew, they're all leftovers from the badasses from Avatar and the sort of dingleberries who accompanied Ripley in Aliens 3. And I kept thinking, I need the people that they surrounded Tommy Lee Jones with. They're young, they're maybe a little bit fresh and green, and he's kind of their father character. But then you also had Joe Pantoliano on that, who gave a great performance, and he's throwing it back for them, and you could tell they had a rapport and going on forever. And like, you're kind of rooting for them because while they're getting closer to Richard Kimball in it, they're also getting closer to discovering the same things that Kimball is, which is who's the real killers and all that kind of stuff. If this movie had gone that way to make us a little more conflicted about who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, what side are we on? The fact on too that I dare say, after everything going on with the writer's strike, that this film comes out squarely on the side of AI.
It does.
I mean, because, and that in itself is such a cliche, because it's whether it's the Iron Giant or iRobot or things like that. We always have to have the sympathy for the those poor robots and stuff. But in some respects, the whole thing could have been much more complicated. And I think this film plays a little bit too black and white.
I think there's, it does get complicated, but then it sort of stops before the real story begins. Because one of the twists, I think, is, it might have even been the third act twist, is it is revealed that it's not really an AI war. And the details are kind of fuzzy, but the whole LA explosion was apparently human error. But even then I'm scratching my head. I'm like, in what world does human error set off a nuclear bomb? Like, in the middle of Los Angeles, right?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't mean for this suitcase thing to explode. Like, what?
That was somebody whose films weren't getting made, so he decided to explode L.A. It's like, I'll show those damn executives.
Marty again.
How dare they?
No, what they did was they had in 2065, they just had a revival of the Warner Brothers movies from 2023. And that killed like hundreds of thousands of people. Right?
It's not planned. Son of a bitch.
We're not bringing any of the JLA back.
No. Yep.
Sorry, Gal.
But at the end, when spoiler alert. Actually, let me put up that
you had it
that banner here. Okay, but yes, but at the end, AI wins, as we say. But we find out that the artificially intelligent creatures, the robots, whatever, they want to coexist with mankind. But mankind has built all these weapons to target them and destroy them because they don't see them as people, because frankly, they're not. There's something in between. But at the end, I want to see those talks like, okay, mankind basically doesn't have a chance against these robots, but the robots don't really want to kill mankind, but man still kind of believes that they do. So I'm sorry to say there's a sequel lined up for this, but I feel like this could have been the halfway point of the movie. Then we find out how we move on from there.
I've heard other people say that, like, could this have been, a miniseries or something a little more where you can do obviously a little bit before this movie, thicker pieces in the middle of this movie. And then obviously there's a whole bunch of pages where this can go after, because AI won. You've crippled the United States' biggest weapon. Have you truly exposed that it was human error fault enough for the world to be convinced that everything's right and we don't need war and coexist can happen? We don't know yet. Or that the springboard's not quite all the way fully jumped there. And I'm okay with that, because like, not everything has to have, end in a nice tidy bow, but at the same time, maybe you're leaving some compelling drama on the table. That's fair.
And also going back to Allison Janney's character, I think that if like that would have been a tremendous discovery to find out that she's been at war with something that doesn't want to wipe her out. And that almost underscores the tragedy of her son's, death. Although it does, I think there's some more nuance there, because her boys, at least one of them, was actively, deceived and murdered by these things. So does that mean there are bad AIs out there? Are they all connected? How does the whole thing work? Too many questions, as the Riddler once said. But I love the some of the performances, like was it Madeline Unavoyles
She's so
plays plays Alfie, the little girl AI who we've got on our screen backdrop here. I think a really great performance. You get a lot of the feel of it from watching the trailer, but it's just there's so much more room to breathe in this, and you really see this character kind of come to life from not being able to really speak because she just watches cartoons to having full on emotional kind of crying fits during the ET portion of the climax.
I know. I see the
she's got
scorecard over here.
But she also embraces a little bit of that sort of Zen philosophy that is very specifically Asian, and from that culture that is kind of refreshing in a way too. That because you start to wonder, okay, are we, is this going to go into sort of a anti-Asian thing or something like that? Because it's just very much about that one specific region that seems to be the problem, or at least as the film focuses on. But you're right, and I think that when she is allowed to interact with Joshua, the Washington character, there's some real banter and some real intimacy and some moments there. And I like the way she helps him and even, contributes to the comedy with the car problems and some of those things. I wish that had more of that. I mean, honestly, if they had watched The Fugitive before they said, we're filming this screenplay, I think they would have rewritten that screenplay, because I think they would have given a lot more to Janie and her characters. I mean, there's a couple people in that who figure in the very end, running down the long bridge to, try to attack and things like that. And they're almost, cut from that Stephen Lang kind of character from Avatar, where he's just a bully. He's just a brutal person. It's like, she's not that. Why does she have all these people around her like that? Wouldn't have been more interesting if they were true good people, but maybe they just were misinformed or slightly uninformed,
or just caught in a up in a decades-long war.
Exactly. They're soldiers who are not necessarily going to ask questions that they aren't paid to ask. But but they also don't have to be just vicious, people who are like crazy, badasses who, hey, we're sanctioned to shoot here.
Yeah, and you're both right. Like, that's where you can, instead of dip the toe into something subversive, you can truly jump the cannonball in the pool and do it. Like you said, like change the hearts and minds of hardened soldiers, have the whole war mean a little bit further and bigger, where those are bigger ideas that can play here. I hear you.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, you kind of alluded to this, and I felt that way, not even really thinking about it, but it was sort of in my subconscious. But everything that we're seeing going on the world stage now, particularly the events of last weekend, it is just a lot of death and destruction, and it almost implies what those soldiers were kind of going through, because we don't know how many people they had lost or how many theaters they'd been in with atrocities on kind of both sides. But I feel like this is, if Alex Garland had written and directed this movie, it really would have been kind of about those themes. What? Yeah. Well, okay, I'm not talking about the follow-up movie he did to Ex Machina, because I think that was kind of weak sauce. But I just think that he gets more into the dazzling technology on a budget with things that ideas, things that you don't get in the kind of the multiplex fare. But yeah, I'm with you, Jeff. By the time, like in the trailer, you see a couple of those explosions, one of which is a pretty spectacular, not exactly a nuke, but it's the one with the shockwave comes right at John David Washington, right? But by the time you get to the 7th or 8th one in this movie, it's just like, no, this is not spectacle anymore. It's just like, it looks like a plug-in.
It does. And to just add a little more dimension to it, this is sort of my problem that I've always had a little bit with James Cameron, particularly with his Avatar stories. And that is he's, trying to take the side of the pacifists and the people who, live off the land and live in harmony with everything. But boy, he spends 45 minutes really bombing the shit out of everything. And he really loves all that stuff to the point where it's almost unsavory. I mean, that was my biggest problem with the sequel, The Way of Water, is I think it looked great. And there were a lot of wonderful moments, and I love the big whale having such a key supporting part. But then there's a battle where they're just slaughtering people, and it's just goes on and on and on, and they're drowning, and oh my god! And it's too much. And Francois Truffaut once said there was no such thing as an anti-war film, because war is glorified on the big screen. But you put a score and a soundtrack with it and drama and all that kind of stuff, it makes it look spectacular. And in some respects, that's true here as well. But it's overkill.
I will
It-
say,
go ahead.
Truffaut never saw All Quiet on the Western Front from last year. That is a
Yeah.
true anti-war.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Part of
Oh,
me is that guy. Part of me is that guy that sometimes tries to push back and say that every war film is an anti-war film in disguise, where there's always some agenda that's trying to be like, hey, this looks great, but it's not, it's for the foolhardy, and whatnot. No, I think you guys have coined a term here on this show here. Like, we always talk about in the horror movies, the whole torture porn subgenre that's been going since Saw the last 15, 20 years. Maybe we have a war movie, maybe we have slaughter porn going on right here, where like how much war do you have to show to like really just cut people to shreds just for the sake of having a body count in film? Like, some movies show that well. Some movies just go for it. Now, it depends on the scene. Like, obviously, you can do opening Saving Private Ryan, where that you hear the stories of D-Day, and that sounds pretty right on. Yet it still is overwhelming enough where you can maybe feel like slaughter porn. Then you get something like 1917, where the deaths are smaller and more immediate and close by. A big war is going on, but you're not seeing just the bodies flailing at the camera and whatnot. So there are shrewder ways of doing this versus this movie is true. The suicide bot running down the bridge to go kill a bunch of things. Like,
I thought. I mean, that
inventive way of doing it.
That was an innovation that I mean that. I think I'd heard that there had been sentient robots in science fiction, like sentient weapons before, but it was just so interesting because when the first one gets launched, I think it says, thank you. It was an honor serving with you or something as it marches down. And I like the way it kind of runs, down the bridge, and it's kind of horrifying. I do like the delayed response of a lot of this technology, like those some of those projectiles that get thrown. You think they're just there's weapons or like bullets being shot out of guns, but some of them are sticky grenades that attach to people, and then But I gotta ask this.
Okay.
Is it a Marines like no one left behind thing or what? But because when that group gets helicoptered out and the one girl who's like last on, she gets shot with one of these things, they discover it while they're up there. They take an awful long time. I was waiting for them to just say sorry and then throw her out so that she would explode in midair and save the helicopter. But the one guy's hugging her and twisting around no. I'm like, yeah, exactly. No, get her off this ship.
And it might have meant something if we actually spent some real time with her. She's kind of set up for a minute, and then we're supposed to really sympathize with her tragic death, which as tragic as it is, even without the investment of character. But again, those are those opportunities where they miss stuff. If that had happened later in this story, and they were torn between what do we want you with us, but you're going to kill us all, and then they toss her out because they have to, then that death would have had some real meaning and those characters would have been sympathetic. But as it turns out, they seem like they're straight out of, The Purge.
Well, I'm thinking of the Marines from Aliens, Vasquez. If that had been, Jeanette Goldstein in that role and it had come later in the film and she realizes she has one of those things on her, I think she would have thrown herself out of the chopper.
Right.
And hopefully taken out one of those robot battalions with her if she could.
I'll throw Starship Troopers out there. That's a movie where you flip the Marine code and that either someone's kicking her out of the plane or that person's like, fuck it, I'm taking the bugs with me, and they're jumping. Definitely. Right. There's a flip switch there somewhere.
Well, all right. We'll circle back to the creator if we have more things to say. But I do want to talk about Ex Machina because this is I finished watching it today and I forgot how much I am in love with this movie. It came out 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Alex Garland. It's like our introduction to Alicia Vikander.
Yep.
It's kind of our introduction to the power duo of Domhnall Gleeson and Oscar Isaac. This year later, they'd be banging about the universe in Star Wars. It's a 4-person, unless you count the helicopter pilot. The 4-person drama takes place in a remote bunker. Billionaire. I used to call him like a Steve Jobs character, but now he's more like I guess an Elon Musk type of guy. Holds a Willy Wonka style contest in his company to get the top engineer to spend a week in his secluded location to just hang out, do whatever. But it turns out he wants this kid, played by Domhnall Gleeson, to help him do a Turing test on his new AI simulant, played by Alicia Vikander. Now, this movie is about ideas. It's a low key horror movie.
Yep.
that has some real horror that I hadn't picked up on this the first time I watched it, but this idea of remoteness and being trapped. First, you're trapped in a wide open space because you're literally have to be helicoptered over several hundred miles to get to the place where you're at, and you don't really have a working phone because that's at the behest of your host. And then you're trapped in this compound that has random lockdowns, and then you're perhaps trapped in a room forever. You talked about Saw. This is almost like the end of the first Saw movie where the one guy is stuck chained to a wall. Let's start with a temperature read. I love this movie. Jeff and Don, what did you think of it? And what do you think of it the first time you saw it and revisiting it for the show?
You want me to go first, Jeff?
Sure, go ahead.
No. When I saw it then, I was all in. It's one of the most absorbing movies you can see because it does favor setting and intimacy more than spectacle, and you're completely sucked in by a very compelling performance by Alicia Vikander, and then Oscar Isaac just dialing it to 12 and having a good time, and then Domhnall Gleeson being your kind of your Virgil through this particular hell. And
nice,
fascinating, big ideas going on all over the place and all that. And the movie had me. The movie really, really, really had me. And I'll admit where it lost me or where it slipped on the end was when you have all these hefty, big ideas that and implications of this and implications of that. When you couldn't, for me, the movie couldn't quite all the way land the plane, because by the time you get to the end and all you're doing is fighting over a goddamn knife on the floor, like we're watching a bad episode of Dynasty or fucking Colby's, like we're watching a night soap opera bullshit ending where I'm like, oh, come on, that's all you had was wrestling on the floor for the one knife in the room. Like, that's after all of this, we go down to this. Now I get that reading it afterwards, like, all right, fine. Carnalness and whatnot, like maybe that wins a little bit, so to speak, but I don't know. I thought a movie with bigger ideas would have a more interesting way of ending it than it did. Now, grant all the things about it, fantastic performances, sucked in and all that, but I got to the end, I'm like, oh fuck, like it was like the mumblecore science fiction film that just kind of stopped because it didn't know what to do with the ending,
But
we'll come back to that. I have
thoughts. That's the penultimate ending, though, Don.
Yeah.
And it's to Ian's point, they don't have exactly access to weapons. I mean, even Nathan, the Oscar Isaac character, basically takes the bar from a dumbbell. It's not like he's got big weapons around her either. It's all kind of improvised. So I can give him that a little bit. I think the shock of them doing that to him, which you're not really sure was coming, and then he gets it from behind and stuff. But the real shrewd, I think, ending that you're asking for is when she locks Caleb into his room, and it's like, and there he's stuck forever to just basically dry up. And you think, is that too cruel for him? Well, they both had kind of the opposite sides of the male kind of cliche. One's the caretaker, one's the man trying to Pygmalion her around and everything else. But it didn't matter, because I think Ava had learned that in order to survive, and if she was going to actually exist, she had to go to the world and see if she could pass the Turing test with everybody else on the planet.
I love all that.
And he was just sort of collateral damage. But I will go on record and tell you both that this is my favorite movie of the last 20 years, or this century so far.
That's high praise.
I think it's one of the best science fiction films ever, and I can get a little bit of we went to violence there, but I think that's typical with the Nathan character is very violent in it. Even remember the one time when he's just walking down the hallway and he suddenly spits. It's just such a brutal guerrilla move. It's like, God, but it's his house, his rules, whatever else. But he's just crude and he's kind of gross, even though he's this brilliant guy. And, he also thought of, the stuff that really has become the whole gestalt now of computers. Maybe we knew it was coming there, but, he's not just following where you go and buy like Amazon did, but he's following where you go and what you think and what's the kind of visuals you like and what's the kind of colors and things it's all the profile of you, which sets her up. But for me, I think it's just to your point earlier, I think it's a very, very cerebral film, just to think about it and who's playing who and what really makes somebody human. And I love, dare I say, it's kind of cynical, but I love that the ultimate test of her humanity is that she's a shit, that she does something truly awful. Like the worst of mankind is like, there you go. She's going to pass for in person because she's got that selfishness down, right? And she knows how to be self-interested. And I thought that was very clever in its funny, sort of tragic way.
Well, I mean, I don't know. That's the thing is, I don't know if she's a shit, because if you think about the idea, she was one of several generations of this kind of prototype person that he was trying to build. He built all, Nathan built all kinds of different, sizes and shapes and, ethnicities of this robot. And just essentially every time a new generation, he needed to come up with a new version of it. He said he scrapped the memory of it and just kind of like started over. But Ava kind of comes to figure out the history of this by looking at these robot corpses and the remnants, the failed models that were being kept in the closets around this compound. I think she knew it was up. And so she had to devise a way to get out of there. And she knew that her creator was not going to let her out. So she decided to put on all of her feminine wiles and her charms to play Caleb, the Domhnall Gleeson character. So it's not... I don't think she turned bad. I think that from very earlier than anybody, including myself, until the second time I watched it, I think she was calculating this from like day 2. Yeah. Because she's artificial intelligence and everything we see in sci-fi, like down to Skynet, like they're like, once that came online, it determined our fate in a microsecond. It's like, wait a second, they're going to try and switch me off and I have bombs. Okay, humans have to go. I think she worked all that out. And what I loved is there is the scene towards the end where Nathan installs a backup camera that's not connected to the house network, in order to spy on Ava and Caleb to see what their plan is. And he thinks that he's outsmarted them, but it turns out Caleb outsmarted him by setting things in motion earlier than that. But then we look at what Ava did, and she outsmarted both of them by setting things even earlier in motion. Yeah. So what I liked about it is the film is going along and everybody is on top until they're very quickly not. And Don, this goes to your point about the kind of the bizarre, wrestling over a knife or a dumbbell climax. What I was with you the first time I watched it. The second time I watched it, I was really paying attention to what was going on with Oscar Isaac's performance, because he's standing over this robot woman that he's just like battered her arm off. And I think in that moment, he starts trying to drag her back to her room. And you almost get the feeling like, okay, enough of this. I'm just going to download your consciousness into something else. I'm going to start over. I'm done with this model. But then Kyoko, the servant, sex robot, comes up and stabs him in the back, and it goes in like butter. It's not like this generic like slashing, stabbing. It's very calculated right in the back. And then he turns around and then Ava gets him in the front. And again, it kind of goes in like butter right through the heart. And as we see him stumble down the hallway, he's in shock. He was like, okay, what's going on, or something like that. And he collapses on the floor and he slowly dies. We can see him, struggling for breath. Ava comes and leans down next to him. And his last words were, Ava. What I loved about this moment is, in a matter of a minute, you go from a guy who, according to what was told to him earlier in the movie, is a god in a sense, to being completely humbled and destroyed by his own creation, who doesn't really care about the fact that he's dying. She's interested, but she's not shedding a tear for him. There's no love like, oh, you gave me life. It's like, no, you turned me on. I'm just an experiment to you. So I'm going to go out and find some real people. That's what I love about this climax. And it is so out of the blue that it's not what I was expecting, I think, in a good way. But I understand where you're coming from, but I read it differently the second time.
I think it did play better for me the second time too, where I knew it was coming. It didn't help to know it was coming, but I did try to pay attention to what you said about just like all right, there's got to be motivations that get me closer to this or closer to that. And by the time, and I like what you said about the spit and whatnot, the grunt mentality, or the dominant personality that Oscar Isaac was swinging there for a bit, that does culminate to a point where like what's going to give, and we saw what gave. So yeah.
Well, it's so
Get it.
funny too, because I think with the Nathan character, he is this genius, right? He's brilliant, and he's able to figure out all this and make all this change in the world, and literally own hundreds of hundreds of miles of this land that you know, he's got this isolated house and everything. And then yet everything we see of him sort of betrays that. Sometimes he has very intellectual conversations, but a lot of times he's playing bullying games,
Yeah.
Or he's drinking to excess, or he's walking around with his shirt open and he's unkempt, and you know, and then even like, you know, you want to see me dance, you know, and then he kind of does this really crazy dance, which is
Yeah.
one of the funniest moments in the, really not too many funny moments in the film. But and then at the end, he's just, to your pointy, and he's like, he's almost dragging her away like he's a caveman. You know,
Yes.
like suddenly here's this genius, and he's like down to his base sort of male sort of instincts, and he's done that a number of times. Even his putting down of Caleb all the time and sort of making him feel belittled and lesser and all that kind of stuff. So it's very intellectual, but it's also, I think, very primal in its way too. The other thing too is, and I maybe overstated it, I didn't mean to suggest that Ava was evil. I think that Ava was not the innocent, and in that sense that her calculation is very sort of shrewd and like, oh, she's a chess player. Because one of the things that I loved about it when I first watched is like, I found her so much more attractive as the robot when then she puts on that stupid wig and that dumb little dress. But I think she's doing that to look helpless. Like, I don't really know how it, and that's where I need you, big Mr. Domhnall Gleeson, Caleb, to show me the real world and all this. And then at the end, she puts on the costume and she's got the dress and she's walking the heels to the helicopter. Like, she knows what she's doing, but she plays the innocent little child, almost like playing dress up with a bad wig to make her look more frail. And that's just to get him, making him think that she's that, and she's not.
You know who she looks like? She looks like 11 from the first season of Stranger Things before that came out.
That's right.
You know, the
if
short
11 is an
cropped hair.
homage to her. That's an interesting thought.
But yeah, I mean, the other thing, you know, we talk about AI now, and it's much more in the news, which I think is why Ex Machina is much more relevant today. I think if you put this movie out today instead of the creator, it's going to be a huge hit.
It would be up for Best Picture, as it should have been then, but it was maybe ahead of its time.
Correct.
Totally robbed. But the idea of AI, at least right now, and I know they're trying to improve it and work on it, but it's basically, it's not true artificial intelligence. It's just the sum of all the knowledge that you feed into it, right? It doesn't have original thinking as we know it. But with Ava, you know, we can see that she is developing a personality. She's developing imagination. She is passing the Turing test, but in the early stages of her coming online, I can imagine some of that cunning that maybe led to this plan possibly had to do with the person who made her. Those kind of like, you know, killer instincts. Maybe
she learned from the best, right?
Well, I'm saying, like, maybe if Caleb had been the super genius and created her, maybe she would have had more of gentler instincts. I don't know how much of that it goes to nature versus nurture in a sense.
True. Yeah.
I also love Alicia Vikander's performance here, because in some of the scenes, I noticed there was something strange about her acting, and I don't know if this is a deliberate choice. It was just my own headcanon, I think, but in the way that she emotes with her face, it almost feels like she's portraying these kinds of like gears and pistons and things working underneath this skin, this artificial skin, to make these movements. There's something mechanical trying to act natural in her performance that I just thought was really cool.
It's a layer. I see it too. And she's so damn good.
And she doesn't do any of the typical 7 little moves that you would do between it. It's interesting. Do you remember when the Final Fantasy came out? That was the first sort of fully computer generated film, and the main character's hair moved more than her face did. And one of the things that they criticized about special effects back then was that they hadn't gotten the face right, because there were so many infinitesimal movements that eyes do, a brow does, the skin of your forehead moves, that they weren't recreating, but they were getting that hair to flow just perfectly like a Breck girl. And somehow Alicia Vikander in this performance eliminates those little extra things, like the Hugh Grants and the, you know, those kind of little twitches and things that make him such a human and vulnerable person were robbed from her. In fact, it's almost like she said, okay, as an actress, I have to go from A to D and I can't hit B and C.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a little bit of an oddness there too. The other thing I just want to say, and this is one of my favorite stories, I think you and I have talked about this a number of times, Don, but just to give Alex Garland credit, not only as a writer, but also as a director, two things. One is, I love the fact that every time Ava talks, there's a little bit of something under the voice that gives, and that sound design is fantastic, because without her ever sounding like she's talking like a robot, or even C3PO, sort of through the tinny kind of like, whatever it is, there's something about her that's just a little foreign. And it's such a little subtle thing there. And it's like the voice isn't quite right entirely. And that's throughout the film. And I just love that, because you're constantly aware with not only seeing through her thing, and when she turns profile, like you've got in the picture there, and same that they took from that kind of idea in The Creator. She's not a real person, but those other little things too. I just want to tell you one quick story, because you'll appreciate this, talking about not getting robbed. It's one of those few times in Oscar history you go like, how did they get that so right? But the other nominees for best visual effects that year were all $200 million films. The Last Jedi, Mad Max Fury Road, which I would have bet money on to win, The Martian, and I forget what the fourth one was. But here comes Ex Machina with its $15 million budget and takes the Oscar for visual effects.
Wait, did you say, I forgot, but 15?
$15 million is what that film cost.
Okay.
Smart stuff.
Isn't that incredible? I know, it's wonderful.
I did want to touch on this in terms of comparing The Creator and Ex Machina. Instead of playing them off of each other, I want to just unite them and say, why the hell do we need $200 million budget movies anymore? You look at what's going on here. I didn't, maybe I forgot or I didn't know, but because everyone's talking about, The Creator is $80 million, and it doesn't look like it. It's phenomenal through and through.
3 times that.
Right. But, and I granted, Ex Machina is it's kind of a single location film. You don't have the CGI everywhere, but $15 million to do all of that. And I got to say, one of the things I loved about it is the production design that probably cost like maybe $25. Was the Oscar Isaac's character's office with the wall of Post-its. It's almost like a waveform or something.
Like all his thoughts that there's a thought. I'll come back to that one later. There's a thought. But I had 20 of these just before I even urinated first thing getting out of bed in the morning.
Well, with effects, Will Johnson and I talk about this on our show a lot, where we've reached a point with those $200 million ones where just too many things are fake. Like when the outfits you're wearing are fake and you're wearing the dot suit, and you need extra makeup to animate whatever you are here, and then you have all that with green shapes and things behind you, where the majority of what's in the frame is CGI. You can tell you can't get the layers to all work because there's too many layers to get to work.
And it doesn't have the weight.
No, there's not a weight.
Like people have weight when they're flying through the air. They would have weight. They fly through the air like they're. But that was what her King Kong is. At some point, Naomi Watts' back would have been broken, despite the fact that ape looked good.
But here in Ex Machina, and for all of our characters in Creator, they're wearing like a CGI balaclava, or how do you say balaclava? Like that's about as far as they're going with that. And then everything else is the other 85% of the picture is location shooting or production design, and it shows. It just looks like the space has weight to go with the actors that are still there to have weight. Wait, Jeff, you said it perfectly.
Well, in some ways too, I think less is more.
Hell yeah!
Like they only really did her, and boy, did they do her perfect, because they had that see-through thing, and that was incredible green screen. The Revenant was the other movie, which they spent a lot of money on that because it was outdoors and stuff. But I mean, that wasn't as much visual effects. But at the same time, another big budgeted film that was bested by the little engine that could.
I love it.
One thing I want to ask, because this occurred to me before I watched both of these movies, and I was thinking of another, I think, great artificial intelligence film, Her, from a few years ago with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson.
If Jeff's asking me the question he's asking, that's my pick for best science fiction movie of the last 25 years. Is Her.
That might be my number 2.
Yeah,
I got to watch that again, because I only saw it the one time. But man, but here's a question. And there's probably other examples, and they're all like counter examples of what I'm talking about. But can you guys see a significance to these AI embodiments being, female? Like there's a little girl in the creator.
Yeah,
You know,
it
both
helps.
her and also you know, Ex Machina are women. Is it, you know, we have seen, you know, like Prometheus or even, you know, Ridley Scott's
AI.
Alien, the AI slash robot
Handy
is a
Joel,
guy,
you know?
right?
Yeah.
But do you think there's some kind of significance to it other than like, oh, we need some contrast, because it's always going to be like a guy inventor? Are we
Unfortunately,
going to
there's
see
that,
like
yeah.
movies with like a female AI inventor or something like that, where she's building a guy robot? I don't know.
Man, you're going to take it all the way back to like Small Wonder and Tiffany Brissett from the 80s, you know? Who is also, I'm not going to put, now I'll put Alicia next to Tiffany for a second. Little Tiffany is what you're talking about. Like, I know she did the robot voice, but like zero extra things, you know, no Hugh Grant, no dither, no nothing. And that kid did pretty darn good for a while.
I've got to go back to my cabinet.
Yeah.
It's a great question, because you wonder, is it just to avoid making it such a literal sort of Frankenstein metaphor where you have the father, son, God complex thing a little bit literal or not? But it might be about vulnerability, and I think maybe the misdirection. I think in the creator, you know, you think, oh, this weapon has to be an adult and some, you know, Roy Cohn or something kind of character walks around who's, you know, I'll show you evil. Wait till I drop my bomb on you, you.
Like stogie in his mouth. Let's go. Yeah.
I would love that. That would be an awesome movie.
A bouncy C. I used to be a bomb.
Yeah. 85-year-old Christopher Lloyd walks out. Kids, what are you doing?
Yeah, get off my lawn.
Yeah.
You know, like Clint Eastwood as
the weapon to kill all time. Yeah.
I know what you're thinking. But you know, maybe it adds a touch of vulnerability or unexpectedness to it. But yeah, it is, you know, at some point we'll have to get into you know, sort of a female Dr. Frankenstein, though. Speaking of Oscar Isaac, apparently he's going to be doing a version of Frankenstein for Guillermo del Toro.
Andrew Garfield, I heard what you heard.
They haven't told us who's playing who, but my guess is Andrew Garfield will be playing Victor Frankenstein.
I agree.
Oscar will be playing the creature.
Oh
gosh, who's I'm blanking on her name
Give
now.
him better makeup than Apocalypse, and we're fine.
From Pearl. Why am I blanking on who that actress is?
Mia Goth.
Mia Goth, yeah, she's playing the bride. I mean, the Victor's bride from the original story, who figures in the story a lot more than I think she did even in the movie. And then apparently, I think Christoph Waltz just got cast. My guess is he has to be the blind man who takes care of the creature, which is a bigger part of the original story than in the movie and sort of the cliches. But they haven't told us who they're playing.
He wouldn't be the townsfolk man of villain
he
person.
Could be, you know,
head
hard to say.
pitchfork, you know.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's interesting that it's they haven't told us who's playing it. But you know, they did that National Theater thing a few years ago where Benedict Cumberbatch and
Johnny Lee Miller
reversed roles, and they played they did it on stage, and one played Dr. Frankenstein and the other played the creature, and then they flipped the roles, and they did that same thing. They filmed it. It comes out in Halloween sometimes, and they show both versions of it, which is very interesting.
That's
cool. What is it about? This is kind of like going off topic, but not really, because we're talking about
like
movies
I was just off topic. Sorry.
Well, no. I
brought up Small Wonder.
Well, I love it.
Yeah, it's all of a piece, because Frankenstein was sort of the prototypical AI story, right?
That's right.
Can you create life out of nothing, or out of the remnants of life,
right?
And would that life have a mind of its own? You know, what does that exactly mean? Is it human? And we're asking all these questions with AI. Question: what is the point of artificial intelligence? Like, why do you think mankind is obsessed with creating something that's smarter and possibly more powerful, more dangerous than itself? Don, what say you?
I know this answer. Time saving. We can't have slaves anymore, so let's make machines do the work we don't want to do for us. I don't want to do math, so let me do a machine that does it faster than me. I don't want to upkeep all this data and run all these servers. Let's let a machine do it instead of me. It's laziness and convenience.
Well, that's, I just want to say there's this, I understand where you're coming from, but I draw a distinction between that's just technology, right?
Right.
Technology is about making our lives easier through, you know, innovation in tools.
Yeah.
But it feels like, and that's kind of where we're at right now with AI, but it feels like the powers that be, despite all the Terminator movies and Ex Machina and all that stuff, all the warnings, we seem to be trying to get into a direction where we are building something that is sentient, that's aware of itself, just perhaps to prove that we have godlike abilities. I don't know what that's about. It seems very foolish.
below
I
your
think,
waist and above your knees, right there. It's all it
Ugh.
is. It's well, no, it's just it is
Well-
that it's superiority complex of man.
but I also think maybe there's a touch of commentary about loneliness in there. Like I think
Good one.
when television started and everybody was just kind of watching the box Home Alone, and it became conversation in the room with them, that they didn't now have to talk to their family. They could all just watch Steve Allen or Ralph Cramden or whatever, I Love Lucy. And I think the more and more we've gotten technology around it with the phones and the computers and everything else, we're very isolated. I mean, they say that with every great invention, there's always a great side and a downside. Hey, it's great. I've got the ear pods in, and we've got coffee cups with our name on it from Starbucks, but it's all kind of selfish too. We're all sort of in our car thinking we rule the world, and we don't realize if we roll down the window and step outside our car, it changes. But so maybe it's something about that. I also think that there's a little bit of the attitude in the science world of, why climb a mountain? Because it's there. If we can do it, let's see what we can do with it. I think at one point it was to help elongate life, like with artificial limbs and things like that sort of did thinking for us, or were, more sort of reactive fake arms and instruments that weren't just rubber gloves like Harold Lloyd wore when he lost half his hand in that accident. And then it just becomes, I think, where it gets to be like, well, we could do that, but now let's push the technology even further. And we have a computer that can talk to us, and Sirius can turn on our lights and knows what music we like to hear.
Yeah.
And you
Back
seem
to
like
what
you're
I'm
in a
saying.
down moody, and let me put on some Coltrane for you, whatever, I mean, it's like, holy shit, now they just said, and then, as we get isolated and maybe a little lonely, we think that maybe this will be a companion for everybody.
Yes, I agree with all of that, but I agree that no, I don't support it. I agree that might be a motivation.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I don't know, and that's because the more I see about this, the more I think, okay, well, there's an AI that passed the bar exam. Like, am I really going to have someday a computer advocate if I go to court? Do I want that, or do I want someone that I can sit down and talk to about the nuances of my case and kind of plead my case to someone, and maybe that helps, and maybe that is something. I go in and talk to a screen, and it will feed all this data into my lawyer for the case for the next day. Do I want an AI shrink? No, I want that human companionship. And I'm not convinced that I take your point, Jeff, as I said, but I'm not convinced that the powers that be, the people who are driving this, really give a shit about people and loneliness and the human condition. It just feels like there's something deeper. I can't even say if it's sinister, but another theory that has gained popularity in the last decade or so since we've really gotten into AI is that we are all living in a simulation. And honestly, how would we know? Because
it's the Matrix, right?
Right, but seriously, the Wachowskis were onto something. I think 20 plus years ago. It's entirely possible, because we are seeing this with simulations, with VR goggles, and able to plunge ourselves into these alternate realities. Someday we're going to get there too, possibly.
We are.
So who's to say that we didn't, or something didn't achieve that 100,000 years ago? And I'm not even talking to you. I'm imagining all this. Dreams are my downtime. They're when I reboot the system.
And we're that last generation. We're the Gen Xers, and just a generation right there with it, where we remember not having all this stuff, not having these extra tools and whatnot. And then I'm watching I'm a school teacher. I teach 10-year-old fifth graders all day, and they are all so native and addicted to this that that's all they know. They don't flick magazines. They don't read newspapers, and it's the tangibleness. And they're all the kids that went through the COVID years of teaching, where that was kindergarten and first grade for them. So all those like first timer social skills, they don't have. They have friends here. They couldn't never keep a friend right here to save their life. And I watch it every day, and it's weird.
It's going to be wonder what they'll be like as adults.
That's why I think it's going to get worse, because all they know is this. They wouldn't mind this to be a little faster. They wouldn't mind this to be a little more intuitive. They wouldn't mind. Maybe. They will see all of these things that are made easier by it. They'll cut all the corners to use it. And because I watch those kids in class like, do we really have to write this out? Can I just type it? And I'm like, I'm watching that generation, and that will be their norm. Because like we were that generation that said, our teacher said, well, you're going to grow up and you're never going to have a calculator in your pocket, and we sure showed them. We got one now. So we made these because we had teachers that challenged us not to do the work last time. Now I get to challenge these little kids, like, well, you have this, but no, go back and do this, and now we have AI that can write papers. So it's going to get worse before.
Yeah, and you
ever
hit
gets
on
better.
something too that Don just built on. I think is that we think we're advancing, and in some respects we're not. We're actually shrinking as humans because of it. I would also say, and this is the easy answer, that I think there's a God complex. Like for as we create more, even the creator. I mean, the name is the creator. Who is the creator? It's God, right? So we always want to echo God and sort of be like him, even though if we truly believe there is a God that can create everything, we can't even touch, what he's doing. We can't even begin to understand it. To your point, we could all be in a simulation. And now the wit of it is that we're catching up to what we've been in since the dawn of time, but now we finally understand it as we kind of ourselves create that in our technology. The one thing I'll just say in defense of sort of good robots out there in the pop culture world is I always loved, and you said the word, it actually triggered me in a good way, Ian. You said the word Data, and I always loved the way Data was treated in Star Trek: The Next Generation. He was this incredible robot who was basically a computer in a library and could do all these things, and yet he wanted to be human.
Yeah.
And he wanted the emotion chip. And remember in the one Star Trek movie when he gets the emotion chip, and the first emotion he feels is terror because they're attacked by, I think it was the Borg Queen or whatever. And so suddenly he's like cowering and, shaking behind the captain's chair as the bridge is destroyed and everything else, if I recall that film correctly. It's like, I thought that was so daring of them to say, yeah, you want your emotion? You want to feel human? Okay, we're going to give you the worst human emotion, terror, fear, fear for your life, and that's the first thing he felt. And yet, in some respects, that's humanity. It comes with love and terror, and
and an expiration.
Hopefully get more love, but
well,
you still get some of those bad feelings too. But that's all part of the game.
I think that's even a premise for a film. I don't know how it would work out, or maybe a play or something. But you've got people who, the more our technology advances, sort of your point, Don, the more reliant we are on it, the less it inspires imagination and original thinking, and the idea of stress and boredom and tedium, right? You got to write these, write in cursive. I remember I had to do 3 times each. We'd have 20 words. We have to write them out in cursive in English class or whatever. Now, you don't even learn cursive practically anymore. But
you don't.
But the further, but it's something that we want. We want the convenience. We don't want to have to know anything. We want everything to be input into us like a computer. Whereas in popular science fiction, to your point, Jeff, these computers, these AIs that we create, like in The Creator, like in Ex Machina, they want what human beings have, which is imagination, which is curiosity, which is uncertainty.
But here's the thing.
Have a drama where there's like that crossover, like or a buddy cop movie or something. I don't know.
We want to know how. See, that's the thing. Like, we're talking about human error and the fallibility and whatnot. Like, all of these creations that we're watching play out in film, both of these two characters right here, they're still written by people. And all of these little complexes, all this little common theme of the robots want what we have is because it's the humans that are writing those characters to want that. It's the robots are the proxy for something in their lives that they're missing and whatnot. Whereas I think and that's why I feel like the grimmest version of the calculation of things, like if a robot ever got sentient and did the math, and we've seen this in a few movies that really go super fucking dark and go for it. We're the problem. We're the one doing all the resources. We're killing everything, spending this, spending that. If a computer really wanted to do the math, we're the problem. Not gosh, we should be human. No. They should take over it for us. Like, and I know that, but in like that's touched upon in many places between Terminator and even Ultron and the fucking Avengers movies and things like that. Like, but I feel like, it's the real answer isn't an answer, or the real answer is the worst one, which is none of us.
You wonder though, in 100 years, if we will have enough humanity left to actually want to fight for the dominance. That's the thing too. What you're saying is like, they don't want to converse with their friends. I remember having discussions with kids who I was doing advertising for, and we do focus groups with them. And, I'd say to them, do you ever, talk to somebody on the phone? Because that was a big thing when I was in high school, right?
Yeah.
You get on the landline and they go, no. I just
I
text
know.
them. It's like, well,
Yeah.
that isn't talking to them.
Oh.
You know, and the,
Ask them on a
the art
date.
of conversation is kind of gone and stuff. I wonder in 100 years if maybe people will be so robotic and sort of machine-like that their range will be like Alicia Vikander's A to D sort of acting performance. That's what will be left of humanity then. And then the robots say, you know, we're more human than these dolts are. They're so two-dimensional. Let's meet them.
We're almost
They're not
saying-
even going to fight.
We're almost seeing
Cameron got it wrong.
Well, we're almost seeing that now with the kind of Kardashian vocal fry, like you know, like, oh my god, I had the most amazing latte ever.
Put 17 of them in a room.
Any of that?
I teach 17 of those every day. Yeah,
that's so true. It's like
like my kids are walking the room.
Nonplussed. That's the major emotion. Nonplussed. How'd you like that?
Oh, and
Right.
it was
That's
mid.
the theme.
Oh,
so when those kids, when the kids I'm teaching now and the generation right above them, we're getting to that point where like you hear about them, like, well, one, that economy and society doesn't help, where like it's so hard for them to live on their own, have a place, afford a place, get a good job, you know, enough to like have a family. Where I wouldn't be surprised if our population numbers just slow a little at least in the affluent areas and countries where no one wants to have 5-6 kids because it can't afford it. It's tedious and it's simpler just to do these things. You know, it's simpler to be solo because I went my whole life so solo that I think we're going to dip. And I have no idea what would ever take to snap us back to, hey, I need to go outside and smell some trees again. I have no clue what it will take to do that.
I think time travel, because I hear this,
yeah.
well, I mean, I hear this argument all the time and I'm sympathetic to it to a degree, but
yeah,
because I certainly went through it, you know, when I was part of a young married couple. It's like, you know, can we afford to have kids?
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, it's always been expensive to have kids. It's always been rough. There's never been, I mean, we are in the most affluent period in human history. People are having, that's why people used to have 8-10 kids, is because half of them wouldn't survive, but then you're still stuck raising 4 kids and grieving the ones who didn't make it. So I think it's because life has become so comfortable. It's like, well, I could have kids, I could further the human species, or, you know, I got Netflix.
Exactly.
And no judgments. I'm just saying we're in a very weird time. And I think what I liked about, one of the things I liked about Ex Machina was they talked about human extinction and how Nathan said AI or whatever 100 years from now are going to look back the way we look at, you know, fossils, you know, these kinds of extinct, dumb, brutish things, which I think also sort of plays into what you were talking about, Jeff, and also you, Don, about his sort of caveman kind of aesthetic. This, like, he was living out this thing that he knew his time was up. Speaking of our time being up, we're a little bit over here, but I just want to say, Racketeer says they would refer to us as a virus or a parasite. I assume you're talking about the AI and not school kids.
Yes. They're covered in viruses too. Don't worry.
Or they could be those movie fans who don't like our talk at all.
Yeah.
Well, there's no helping them, but there's no accounting for bad taste. But thanks, guys. I think this has been a fun conversation.
Really fun.
I like these kind of comparison. I mean, we're always comparing movies, but to specifically line up the way different approaches to a similar topic, I think is very instructive. So I can't recommend. I mean, I can recommend The Creator because it's going to be out on, video on demand in 17 days if Don's typical calculations are correct.
Oh God, I bet it looks so good on the big screen. I hope people see it in the big screen.
Does.
It's great.
And that's the other edge of this sword is it is a non-IP property. Perhaps that's why people can go see it. They're like, oh, I can wait and watch it a month. But we also got to support a movie that cost $80 million and looks like it cost $250 million. It looks better than those $250 million movies. Go see it in a theater. I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth.
Oh.
No, but he's right. I mean, and the more you can get in the theaters, because that's why these films are being made, to be seen on big screens, and it does impress. It does dazzle in the breadth of it and stuff like that. And Ex Machina looked good on the big screen too.
Oh, it looks so good.
It did.
Well, sound design, like you said, that played so well on the big screen.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, some of that reminded me almost like Clint Mansell's score for Requiem for a
Oh,
Dream. There's a little bit of
yeah.
that in there. Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
so good.
yeah.
All right, we could talk about these movies for another 6 hours, but I'm not going to do that till y'all.
Okay.
But I do appreciate you hanging out and talking films with me as always. I don't know what the next one is we're going to talk about. We'll figure out something. I mean, it's spooky season. Not going to talk about Exorcist Believer. Well, maybe when it comes on demand at the end of the month,
It's
allegedly.
17 more days, right? Yeah.
Wow. Talk about a turnaround. Anyway, I have been Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat, Jeff York of The Establishing Shot, and also Don Shanahan of Film Obsessive, and Cinephile Hissy Fit Podcast. Your boy was supposed to be on here tonight with us. He said Ex
Yeah.
Machina is one of his favorite movies. I'm
He
calling
did.
you out, Will.
I know.
Calling you out. No, but hope to have him back on the show sometime. But yeah, it's been great. This has been fun. Everybody out there, thank you for watching either on the replay or the folks who are watching live, kind of dipping in, dipping out. We appreciate you wherever you came in on the conversation. If you like the episode, please like and subscribe and support my fellow Earth's Mightiest critics. All their information is down below. And what did you think of these movies? Did you watch both of them? If you haven't, have we convinced you to give them a shot? Of the two, I can recommend Ex Machina for sure. And just for a little something different, even though it is something borrowed, maybe make you a little bit blue when you consider John David Washington's performance. But yeah, the creator, I think, is definitely worth checking. Oh, one last thing. Nirmata, the artificial intelligence. Did you guys notice on the title cards, they would have like these chapter title cards in the bottom left-hand corner, it said Nirmata. Are we to believe that this is sort of like its recounting of the events of this whole
Wouldn't that be
thing? Because
something?
it has this archival quality to it. I noticed, and there was some other name or initial on the opposite corner. I don't know that was referenced. That's like Easter Egg City right there.
Yeah. I don't know.
Interesting observation.
Yeah.
Damn it, do I have to go watch The Creator again?
I'll watch it again.
Just be glad that they didn't do a sequel to Ex Machina. I kept worrying that they were going to do a sequel
Same.
to that.
Same. Like
glad they did.
her
Hey.
out in the world, yeah.
Maybe The Creator is the sequel to Ex Machina.
Yes.
Say.
It's like 20 or 30 years in the future. You know, who knows?
They could
Anyway,
have done Ava in New York. Will anyone know she's a robot? No.
She can go straight to or it's like 1970s New York. She's a prostitute in Times Square. Yeah, it'd be perfect.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
lines around the block.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, thanks again. Take care. I'm going to cut the stream. I promise right now. You guys have been great. I love all of you. And I will be back at some point, whenever that is, whatever that is. Thank you very much and take care.